Welcome to Math Plus, where math makes sense. If I asked you to find the area of this rectangle, you could count every single square. But what if I gave you this rectangle with lots and lots of squares? There has to be a faster way. Today, we're going to learn how to find the area of a rectangle and understand why the formula works. We don't want to spend all this time counting when we don't have to. What are we counting when we're counting these squares? We're going to come back to the easy one to count. But what is that? That's called the area. The area tells us how much space is inside the shape. So I want you to think of things like when you go to the store and you might buy a little piece of carpet for your bedroom. You need to know what area that you're covering on the floor, and that's what you're measuring. When you go to paint the walls in your house, those walls, you have to know the area so you know how much paint to buy that will cover it. And that's what we're measuring. So if I count all of these squares, I'm finding the area. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. These are 8 square units. Now, we don't know if they're inches or feet, so we just call them square units when we don't have the exact measurement. Now, again, let's look at this area of this rectangle. For us to have to go in and count all of those squares, that's a lot of work. So we're going to find an easier way. We're going to find a formula that will help us find the area. Let's use this one as an example. We want to find the area of this rectangle. You can go in and count them, but here's a faster way. We can go in and count all of the squares in a row, and there's 4, okay? We can also count them going across the top. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I can go in and I can say there are 6 plus 6 plus 6 plus 6. That's a faster way of adding, right? And that would look something like this. 6 plus 6 plus 6 plus 6, and that equals 24. Another thing that I can do is I can multiply. That's a faster way of adding. Multiplying is a fast way of adding, right? I have 6 that I added, and I had 4 of them. So I'm multiplying, and I come up with the same answer, 24. But we want to call it, we're talking about area, so our correct answer is 24 square units. We take the area, which is length times width. So we're going to, I like to tell people too, let's multiply side by side, because sometimes we get caught up in which one's the length, which one's the width. It doesn't matter. You can multiply length times width or width times length, as long as you go to the corner and multiply side by side. So we have this on one side of this corner and this one over here. Multiply and you get your answer. Your answer is 24 square. Let's try another one, but this time we're going to design the area and draw our square units so that you could make sense. Because normally when you do these, you're not going to see those little squares. They're kind of invisible. It's just a way of measuring. But let's do one with 8 units going this way, 8 units, and we'll have 3 units over here. So going across, now I'm not going to be perfectly straight. I don't have a ruler, but we're going to make 3 rows and then 8 columns going down, okay? Now I could sit here and draw, and then I can count, and it's just a lot of work. But what if I just multiply? What if I just multiply them like I've learned? How many squares do you think there should be altogether? And can you figure that out without adding? If I multiply 8 times 3, my answer is 24 square units. Now I have 24. You can count and check me and see if I'm right. See if I'm right. This will work every single time. And if you don't believe it, keep drawing your squares and make sure that you can see that it always is a true fact. One of the things you want to make sure you do, we have our length is 8 units. We have our width, 3 units. 8 times 3 equals 24. But we have to remember to put The area equals 24 square units. You have to write that in. That tells the person reading this that I am figuring out the area. Just like if you were figuring out money, if you had $24, you wouldn't just say, I have 24. You would say, I have $24. So use that unit of measurement, 24 square units. And as the person reading that, I know that you figured out the area. I have a question for you. I have two different rectangles, A and B. Very quickly, before we get the answer, I want you to tell me which one has a greater area. And write that down. Do you think it's A or do you think it's B? Now we're going to go ahead and solve this. You have your answer. We are going to solve it, okay? So I need to multiply 2 times 10, because that's how I find my area. And the area of A is 20 square units. I'm going to write it out. You can write SQ and then a U for units, okay? Well, let's write it out because I told you to, right? All right, what about B? Let's see if it's bigger or smaller. We have 5 times 4. Double check me. And the answer is 20 square units. How did that happen? I want you to see that it isn't by looking at something that you can tell if it has a bigger area or not. Area can be the same in two different rectangles shaped differently. And we always know if they're the same or different because we have to do the math. You have to multiply the width by the length, okay? Different shapes, but they have the same amount of area. Let's figure out the area using a story problem. A rectangular garden is 12 feet long by 5 feet wide. What is the area of the garden? I have a picture of the garden, and you can see here that it's 5 feet wide and 12 feet long. What do I need to do to figure it out? We multiply 5 times 12, side by side, width times length. Why would we want the area of a garden? And what it helps us do is we can measure how many plants that we can plant in that specific area. Let's say that each plant needs 1 square unit. Well, then you can multiply 5 times 12, they're feet. They're going to be square feet. And then you can decide how many plants you can put in. When I multiply 12 times 5, which is length times width, or width times length, they both work, and then I get 60. Now 60 is not my answer. We're measuring in the units of feet. And because it's the area, we say square units or square feet. So 60 square feet. If each plant takes up 1 square foot, I can plant 60 plants in there in my garden. The biggest thing you need to remember is we're measuring the inside of the garden, not the outside of the garden. It's the inside of the garden. That's the area. Let's do a really quick review. We need to know the word area, which is the space inside of a shape, so inside. The formula is length times width. If it helps you, you can just get one of the corners and say multiply side by side. And units. This part is huge. You can't just say the area is 12. 12 what? 12 square units. You can check out our playlist. It's at the end of this video where we talk a lot about area and perimeter. Those two are related to each other, and that would be a great time to introduce perimeter as well.